Welcome to Study Buddy, meditation philosophy for the heart of your practice.
And all three ashrams are here.
That's true. Well, this week we're going to continue the discussion of Sutra 3.13. We'll be wrapping up the sutra today. We're going to touch on a little bit of how it went from 2 weeks ago, because there was a lot of discussion via the Marco Polo app that was I thought was super inspiring. And so I've sort of taken a little time to make sure that we call back to the people who were working with it and sort of bringing up those ideas. And then we move forward into the last portion of the sutra, which really brings the whole thing together, where we see that the absolute independence of Shiva, that is described as the state of the siddha, or the state of the realized practitioner, that this absolute independence of Shiva is something that is different from the independence that we normally associate with from the perspective of our ego, from the limited self. Power, independence, all of these things have a very different definition than how they are defined from the state of Shiva. And that ends up being like the crux of the promise of this sutra, because the promise of the sutra says that the realized being attains absolute independence and power, and that the world bends to their will. Now, from a limited perspective, that sounds like, whoa, wow. But from Shiva's perspective, that's actually what's already happening. So we'll talk all about that, and we'll work with that. Derek, welcome. Good to see you. Cool. Big D. All right. Well, without further ado, let's move into a little bit of movement, guided by Abhaya, and then we'll jump right into the work of the week.
And just because there's a couple of new faces, I just want to explain the reason why we start this way is with philosophy, it's so easy for energy to rise up into the mind, and it can be frustrating or just a waste of energy. So we start by feeling, and then we try to maintain that sense of really being connected to inner sensation as we connect with the energy of the sutra. So take a moment to close the eyes if that feels comfortable. And allow your awareness to start to pour into your physical form. So you can feel your legs on your chair or your cushion. Hips resting, heavy, anchored. Start to trace your awareness up your spine and notice that sense of buoyancy, sense of lightness. And in case you're not feeling that, we'll start to bring a little more lightness to the spine by just gently rocking on the pelvis, left and right. And you'll feel the weight shifting more into one sit bone and then the other. And as the pelvis gently rocks, notice the spine like a piece of tall, pliable bamboo. Just gently swaying based on the movement of the pelvis. And then gently start to circle on the sits bones. So instead of just left and right, there's a sense of gently arcing forward and then to one side, back to the other side. And then let's all slow down. So we're moving twice as slow. See if you can feel twice as much sensation. You are made of 70 trillion cells. Imagine them like a school of fish, all just moving in unison with this very simple, fluid exploration. And then to keep it balanced, when it feels right to you, you can switch directions and move even slower. And let the slowness be interesting instead of boring. And see if, as you become more present in the body, more conscious, if you can release tension through the muscles in the back, the muscles around the shoulders, neck, jaw. And to release tension, you don't have to do anything. It's really the starting to release doership that allows that to be possible. Letting your body just be, letting your breath just be natural, easy. And then allow the circles to get smaller and smaller until you find equal weight in the pelvis. And imagine those circles just spiraling up the spine, even as you're still. That energy starting to travel upward. And just observe the next few breaths from this even, balanced space of feeling and being connected inwardly. And we'll just conclude by ever so gently smiling with the face and feeling the inner brightness that comes with that external action.
We'll move from there into repetition of the sutra for its mantra-like power. Siddha Svatantra Bhava. Siddha Svatantra Bhava. You can repeat it to yourself like a mantra. Just let the vibration work on you. Siddha Svatantra Bhava. Siddha Svatantra. The state of absolute independence is already achieved. So we're familiar with the word Siddha as the realized masters of our tradition, and this represents realized practitioners, of any tradition. That's what the word Siddha means. The where the practice has been achieved. And then this Svatantra Bhava, the state of absolute independence of our work. And so just to call back a little bit to last class, we'll just taking a moment to review. We talked about, we explored the concept of Svatantriya Shakti, and we looked back in the sutras to see that Svatantriya Shakti was originally sort of described to us in context of the whole Sanskrit alphabet. So this means that the alphabet is the manifestation of Shiva, and it represents all of the universe, every letter. And then so the first letter represented our individual perspective, and the last letter represented Shiva's perspective. And we learned from this previous sutra that they come together through single pointed focus. And so we explored the rolling Om, and that place in the M sound, the Anuswara sound, as it's called in Sanskrit, is the unity of those two perspectives. And the prompt was given in the Marco Polo app about, really trying to see when can you merge these perspectives of Shiva in your life. And
do you want to say what the Marco Polo thing
oh,
is?
Sure.
Just in case people
Yeah,
don't know.
thanks. And Padma, could you tilt the camera just a little that way. I'll tell you when, just because I can't zoom it quite right. Just a little that way. Got it. Okay, cool. So Marco Polo is an app that we're using to discuss these prompts from class people are bringing into their life. Here's something that's fun. We're used to seeing everyone's shrine in their rooms from the Zoom application, which is cool. But now we get to see people like in their backyards, people with their kids, people on bike rides, like Sangha, not just people. And it's been really, I feel like yet again we found a new level of connection with Sangha. I don't know how to put it. Maybe you felt it from those videos as well, but it's like I didn't even know that that was there. I didn't even know I was missing that, and now I'm like craving it. So feel free to reach out to me in any way possible if you don't know how to get on that. And we'll get you hooked up with that. It's a free application, and we're all sort of hanging out there between sessions. So a couple of people had some really fun things to share. I'm not going to read the whole quote. I geeked out a little bit, and I actually listened to everybody's things like 2 or 3 times and like wrote quotes from them. Then Abaya said, that's going to take way too long in class to read. Just summarize the quotes. So they're on the screen for now, but I'm just going to talk through them a little. So the first, Marcella broke the ice for the entire community by saying that she was practicing this Om sound when she was driving home, and that single-pointed focus transformed what would be a normal drive where she was usually, where am I going next, to she said she really enjoyed the drive, and it was like a very calm and pleasant experience. And then Sevananda came on and talked about how this single-pointed focus like changed the game for her, and that she had a really powerful experience in the emergency room with her son, where she was repeating the sound of Om into his ear while it was something really intense was going on, and that she actually felt it shift. His heart started beating normally again, which was the cause of the concern, and she felt really calm. And so this was like a big deal for her. And she said that just reflecting on it made her realize what she had been doing, and that was really, even the reflection process was powerful for her. And then the last one for this section, for this prompt, was when Tashi stepped outside the Shoshone kitchen. We got to hang out on the back deck of Shoshone and see the snow on the picnic tables. And he said he was setting this inner goal of trying to experience Shiva through the task he was doing, like chopping a vegetable or doing a dish. And that he said it came, that experience, that merging upward from an individual little perspective of chopping this one vegetable to the bigger experience of what it is we call, the present or Shiva, came to him when he was least expecting it. Because, and I thought this was very insightful, he said, it seems like the mind just gets in the way of that experience most of the time. So it's almost like you have to do the practice a lot so that the mind can eventually fade and you can actually experience it. So those were all ways that people were bridging up from their individual experience to this bigger experience of Shiva throughout the week. And I thought it was definitely worthy of sharing here. Before we move on to the next point, is there any questions or comments about those, or even if did I quote anyone wrong? Cool. So that was like the first third of this sutra, talking specifically about what is Svatantra, what is it? And so then we moved on, just a little bit more review before we get into the new material. We moved on to this concept of owning your practice. The quote from the text said, "You must own that energy of absolute independence, which is really the energy of Bhairava." You must own that energy of absolute independence, which is really the energy of Bhairava. And so one way that we worked with this concept of owning it was through this reflective practice of I am Shiva. Just putting that out there, really trying to like identify with that. No matter what state you're in, whether you're happy or whatever else, or whether life's going away or not, every single situation we're presented with, we can choose to be in this situation through the perspective of Shiva. And that really seemed to snowball for people in their life. Again, not going to go through every single quote, although I did, for some reason, write them all out. But there's just a lot here. I'm just going to touch on really quickly. Dharma, was saying that it helped him snap into a perspective of gratitude. Like the minute he like was like, I am Shiva, it opened him up to gratitude and to seeing his life circumstances as fuel. Thought that was really specific and really helpful. Swami Devananda was saying that that this practice helped her melt into what she described as the void, and that it really dissolved her difficulties. Ture was walking back from teaching yoga class, and saw the snow melting from the trees, and really recognized that snow changing from snow to water, and felt like a real connection there with this idea of like, I am Shiva in a different form. Mahadev listened to the podcast or watched it, because he said when he was watching it and he was looking at all of our faces on the Zoom room, which I'm assuming he'll be doing tomorrow. Hi, Mahadev. How you doing? That he saw that we're all different, like lenses or different petals, almost like of Shiva, and we're just seeing this one reality from a bunch of different perspectives. I thought that was really insightful, like how in this room we're all internally focused and we're all experiencing something, and that when you look at that screen you can see Shiva in its many forms. And Tara said that I am Shiva helped her go from the raindrop to the ocean, and to avoid judgment and accepting and rejecting. And then finally, Jatila talked about having a really particularly challenging day, and he said he like couldn't see a way out of the experience he was having, which I think we can all relate to, like when you're really going through it, like you just can't see how you could not feel like this. And he said that's how he's feeling, and he asked himself, how is this moment an experience of the true independence of Shiva? How is this moment? So it's like you're not feeling good, yet you're still Shiva, and that flipped it for him. That really shifted it for him, and was able, and he just sort of like, he said he just quickly came out of it, out of the experience, even though he didn't know how to get out of it. All right. So, powerful stuff, in my opinion. Sharing from a new place. I think the idea of everybody bringing this practice into their life, obviously we've always been working with that, but to be able to work with it and then comment and then hear each other, really exciting week. I'm going to pan over to Abaya.
Thanks for doing a compilation of our amazing Sangha's
Yeah.
quotes. Getting to hear everybody sharing, and sometimes it was, through challenges or just an ordinary moment becoming sweeter and blissful. To me, that really encapsulates why we're doing this philosophy program. Of course, it's great to have a strong foundation, be able to talk about these things in an intelligent way. But my favorite part of studying the sutras is that it like plants this little seed, and so that I have a spark throughout the day of like, oh, I'm contemplating this thing, and it comes through when I really need it. And so just to hear how that impacted all of you, and how we're sort of inspiring each other by planting these seeds for each other, and bringing the sutras into our days is really just what it's all about. So you guys are all so inspiring, and I'm glad that we can keep that ball rolling together, because it's really hard to do on your own.
Any other comments before we move on to new material? Feel free to just unmute yourself and go for it. All right. So let's move on to the last portion of the sutra. I'm going to pull up this quote from the sutra. And before I pull it up, let's see. Kat, would you mind reading it? I'm going to pop it on the screen. You could.
All elementary worlds, all individuals, all words, and all sentences are absolutely dependent on and under the control of such a yogi.
And so take your time with that sutra. There's the nourishment, or with that portion of the sutra. There are 2 or 3 different instances in this sutra that talk about the power of a practitioner. Is basically how you might summarize it. We see that spiritual practice cultivates power and independence. Now we know this intuitively because Swami Rajananda described spiritual work as cultivating spiritual muscle. So it's like built into like how we've been introduced, that as you do practice, you get stronger. In the last class, we used this metaphor of spiritual practice being like walking up a down escalator. Walking up a down escalator. And I believe a number of us had done that. We saw this as sort of paralleling. This is an image right here of the tattvas. So this is manifestation according to Kashmir Shaivism. Starts from a single point up here, and it sort of unfolds into a myriad of infinite forms. And so in a way, this escalator, it's going down all the time. It's constantly unfolding like an escalator. Just imagine the steps were just being made down, 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 down. And so if you just sit there idly, you just ride that bottom step all the way down into manifestation. And what that looks like, according to sutras, is suffering, because you start to identify yourself as all these forms, and you really forget. Shiva gets further and further away, essentially. Even though we're always Shiva, your experience of Shiva gets further and further away. And so we see in previous sutras descriptions like this, where Lakshmanju translates as, those who are deprived of awareness are pushed down into the field of ignorance. Those who possess the fullness of awareness, however, become completely elevated. So being deprived of awareness, meaning your awareness is in the form and not in the experience of it in yourself, inside, takes us down the escalator. Possessing the fullness means you're walking up it. Now imagine if you're really walking up this escalator, the consistency that is required, the constant effort that is required. And as you actually proceeded up this escalator, you can imagine there'd be fewer and fewer and fewer people on this escalator, because as soon as you stop, you start going down, right? And you can also imagine that the people on this escalator, like at the higher rungs that we're not even up to yet, would be incredibly powerful, right? Imagine if it was a physical thing. These would be like Olympic escalator people, like people with quadriceps the size of a Tour de France champion, right? They're just pumping these steps all day long. I got a big laugh from Dial there. That's great. So that is sort of the metaphor that the sutras are talking about. They're saying these individuals are powerful, and they really mean it. It's not like a metaphor. It's just the power on this realm of existence. We might equivocate with muscular power, but these psychic muscles, like Rudy and Muktananda and Nityananda and Babaji, these individuals are Tour de France champions of spirit. They really do have Olympic level strength in them. We just don't have the eyes to see it most of the time, right? Unless we're really practicing. And so that is the power that we're talking about in here. And if you can imagine having that kind of strength, you can imagine that strength having results like this. That the whole world, all your words, the individuals that you interact with become dependent on this control, or uh, makes the whole universe dependent on them. This world is lying under the control of such a yogi. So, we're presented with a very interesting phenomenon here. And this brings us to the last half of this concept, because there's two sides to this coin. The first side of the coin is spiritual practice makes you powerful. There's no doubt about it. Olympic level strength. But the other side of the coin is the source of this power and the way it really manifests. Because we're told later in this quote, I know it's a short quote, but Megan, could you read it for us? It's coming up here.
Such a yogi who is always intent on determining the reality of Shiva.
And it's might be a little confusing sounding because it's sort of half of the quote, but yeah. These kind of yogis that are at the top of this escalator are always intent on determining the reality of Shiva. That's what defines their power. That's how it's stated in the text. So you're welcome to interpret it however you like, because that's the fun part of philosophy, is actually how do you interpret that? So that is the definition of their work, and it defines their power. So that means that this is not the kind of power our small self considers to be power. This is something different than that. That it's almost as if they're going in the flow of a river, and by going in that flow of the river, they have the power of this river, but they're not directing the river. So it's different than we're used to thinking, because usually when we think of power, independence, control, these things usually associate with, I can direct this river how I want to. I can make my life look like I want to. And that is exactly the opposite, it seems, of what we're describing here. And I'll conclude here with this last point, that just a few days ago, Babaji in satsang was, in my opinion, describing this phenomenon when he said repeatedly, if you remember, that we can't bring our stuff with us to Shiva. We can't bring our stuff with us to Shiva. He said it so many times. And so we find that it's literally shedding the limited self, its wants, its dislikes, all of these things. It's the shedding of those things that bring us up to Shiva. It's literally the shedding of that. So that when you arrive, you possess an independence and a power in your life, but it's somehow very different than how you would have once defined such qualities. And so let's take a moment now and just sort of work with this internally, just literally for a minute. Please, by all means, feel free to write a little, to feel inside a little, and to just sort of work with this in generating a little bit of a discussion. Shedding and releasing is how you go up this escalator. Play with that in your internal practice. you can't bring your ideas with you up to Shiva. So how can you consciously release to go up? To really get what you want in this moment, literally. You've got to empty out, to let go of everything you can. How are you determining, how are you becoming intent on determining the reality of Shiva? Shiva's reality is, it does exist. And you can get there. And it's this practice that the Sutra is describing for us. What is Shiva's reality in this moment for you? How can you experience Shiva's reality right now? And take the next minute to actually write a little bit about your experience. I know we're not all writers, but the act of writing can help you realize that it's a method of reflecting. So just take literally a minute. And what you write could be about your interpretation of this portion of the sutra, how you actually did it, etc. Just another 30 seconds or so. And if it works technologically, a key word would be fun to have in the chat box to inspire a little discussion, or raise your hand and tell us about what you wrote, or raise your hand and tell us something else. Hey, Bob.
Literally, the exact moment the word river came out of your mouth, I was thinking about instead of an escalator, you could think of a river, and you could think of the Ganges continually flowing down from Shiva's head. And if you were trying to swim up a river, you'd certainly not want to be carrying a backpack full of problems. You probably wouldn't want to have boots on. In fact, the less you were dealing with, the faster you could swim. And yet, even that can be speeded up, because if you think about all the muscles and nerves of your body have little electric currents. So you could actually leave your body sitting on the shore and just send those electric currents up the river, and they can travel at the speed of light. They don't weigh anything. They can go directly to Shiva. So by setting your body aside on the shore and taking that which is very light inside of you, you can send it right up the river to Shiva.
Thanks, Bob. I can definitely feel that in, when we practice, and that idea of the exhale rising up the back to the crown. It feels like when you really let go of the body and you're experiencing the lightness that's possible up that river. It's very helpful. Thank you. If anyone has a comment, relating to that, feel free to go next. Otherwise, Anju.
Thanks so much for that, Bob. That's, I don't know, the serendipity of the Sangha. I was also thinking of a river. So, and just the flow of water. I don't think I took it quite as far as you, but I was thinking about how when you're going to cross a river, if you try to swim upstream, regardless, like you're not going to get anywhere. And the way you have to get across is actually to let it, you kind of have to swim sideways and let it carry you. You have to fully sort of let go and go with the rhythm of the water. And it's actually going to get you further upstream and across than if you're paddling and swimming through it. So I sort of had a bit of that similar sort of sensation. And that's kind of, for me, kind of encapsulated in sort of achieving that like witness state and surrender, and really just having that faith to just trust that you can let go, and it's going to take you further than getting caught up in the mind or any of the other aspects of who we are in our physical selves, in order to allow us to really move up instead of getting pushed down.
Thanks, Anju. I really feel you there in a very, very practical way, in the sense that working through challenging situations, it's like our mind wants to just go straight through them, but then when you actually start to consciously work through them, it's like what Babaji says, where you just have to like see what's possible. And it's sort of like the rivers you get pushed in a different direction, but yet you go forward and you end up in a different part of the bank than you were intending. That is really helpful to look at. I would love to play with that this week. That idea of just like I got to keep going forward, but I'm going to let myself be moved by the situation at the same time. So I definitely look forward to working with that. Hey, Yogita.
Well, right before class, I got zapped with a phone call from my older sister, arguing with my niece and different people. We're trying to do this beautiful garden to put my sister who passed away in, and everybody's arguing with everybody. So I
Boy.
was trying to figure out what I can do to try to bring people together. And I've seen myself escalating and trying to, I've got to let go of the tension. And I really can't take sides, you know. And as I was going up this elevator, I could see this beautiful land, Buddha land, this beautiful, beautiful garden. And what we're trying to do is feel love for my sister who passed away. And somehow in the mechanics, we're losing that, you know? So I've got to get myself feeling love and trying to, you know, help them
Hmm.
focus on what we're really trying to do. It's not how many plants there and how, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just
But I
sort of
feel a
feel.
lot better. Yeah. I think you got to let go of the problem sometimes and just try to get yourself out of the tension, and then you can see better.
Yeah, it's so easy to use our will to try to solve situations, and that usually takes us down into the problems, to the, like you said, the mechanics. I think that's such a great term for it. And then, but if we can, yeah, I feel like what Babaji's always teaching us is to surrender and to stay connected to, like what you said with your sister, to stay connected to the love while you deal with the mechanics, and that should take you up. It might be slower than you think, right? Like, but it's like if you can stay connected to the love, then even when you're working with the mechanics, you're it's like an upstream, it's an up escalator kind of experience. But like, it's so quick as soon as you focus on the mechanics of a situation, how quickly it pulls you downstream, and that's sort of what you're experiencing, right? So, or you're seeing your family experience. So that's a very practical experience, and as you work, I mean, that situation's not going away. So it's like playing with this. I say playing because I think it's just fun, but however you would think about it, but you working with this concept of like, how can I stay connected to Shiva and not push the situation away and not try to change the situation, but like, how can I literally be in this situation and work with it consciously? And it could be a really fun thing to share in a couple weeks, honestly. Like, how did it go? I'd like to hear. Yeah. Ellen.
I had like a visualization of kind of like Shiva, which I don't know, it's kind of cool. It was like Shiva was like light, and I knew it was in me, but it was like, up above me. And it was kind of like, how am I going to get there? And so it's like, it was more of like a floating type of thing. And I kind of pictured um, like holding onto a helium balloon. And then I kind of thought of like, when you were talking about how you have to let go of stuff, like how scary that would be as you're like leaving the ground, floating up, like, and you don't like, cause you could fall and you'd be like just scared out of your mind probably to like just keep holding on. and and I was like, wow, but you'd just have to let go of all of that and keep focused on what you're going towards. Because that was kind of like the thing for me. It was like, I think you said something like, how do you get there? And for me, I was thinking like, well, I have to stay focused on that. like I can't look around and get scared about all the other stuff, or all that other stuff is just stuff I have to let go of. So anyhow, that was kind of the visualization that came to me.
It's amazing. It's so fun. It really works. I'm just like doing it. It's fun. The nice part about meditation is like we can try it. I think when we're doing it in our life, it can feel like the helium balloon scare when you feel like you have a situation in front of you that if you surrender right now, it might fall apart. You know, you have a deadline for something and you just have to like grit your teeth and like just crank to get it done. And like I feel like those are the situations where you can really feel that helium where you feel like I'm gonna fall. If I let go of this thing, it's gonna hurt. Things are gonna go wrong. And then but it's like during meditation, it's like we can play with that concept in such a in the same way that we will in life, but it's like we know we're not gonna fall. I don't, maybe when you get into like the inner realms, I know there's experiences that can feel just as real. So, but for the most part, I feel like that's why we have to have our daily practice because it's the only way we can't just expect ourselves to be fearless in these moments if we haven't practiced it and trust it. It's like I remember the first time I went rock climbing, I'd never fallen off of rock. I never got a chance to like feel what that's like. It was my first and only time. And I remember being up about 40 feet and being just so terrified because I just didn't trust the carabiner concept. And I was just like, I just could not relax because I'd never gotten to try falling a little or missing something and like actually feel like, oh, this works. Oh, I'm not gonna, so it's like meditating every day is like a way to practice so that you're not really gonna fall. Or when you do fall, it's it's gonna be okay. Like so thanks for that visualization. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna use that literally to meditate with in the coming weeks. Sounds really helpful. Megan.
I think I read this in spiritual cannibalism that like Rudy was kind of talking about this about how like the like head boss of a business like can't be concerned with like the lower going ons or else like it's just like too much, so like if you want to be able to like see the big picture, like focus on the balloon, like you can't be looking down at the same time kind of thing.
Definitely sounds like spiritual cannibalism. Yeah. Just sort of working with that. It definitely clarifies what Dialan was commenting on, where you just simply have to, in order to make that shift, you have to leave behind like the infinite myriad of things in your life, and you have to find a single pointed focus that's above them. That's be fun to find that part and share it with us on Marco Polo.
Hi, Sachem,
Hey, Tashi.
everyone. So I was just reading, I've sort of been thinking more about this sutra on the screen here. I feel like the first thing I thought of when I saw that is it's simply like the wish to grow. Uh, Intent on determining the reality of Shiva is better to be in the experience of the flow of that consciousness. always being intent on that, to me sort of indicates the necessity of persistence, like the daily practice and throughout the day making the effort to experience it. So I feel like it's very relevant to the beginning of us using Marco Polo and sort of bringing it more and more into the day as we do these programs.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your reflections on that as you start to work with it, because I think that is Jatila was mentioning this in his we keep saying this term. I feel like we should be getting paid for this. His last Marco Polo. Um, he was saying like how you can get overwhelmed with trying to bring something into your life like all day, and that he found that when he like relaxed and realized that Shiva awareness was there all the time. I'm not trying to recreate this thing. I'm not trying to make this thing. That like he found that he could relax into the work because it's sort of overwhelming otherwise. Like, I mean, I'd love to know how that goes for you all. Like, we all have good days when we're like, I want to do a lot of practice today, and it's like 4 or 5 hours go by and you're like, you don't have that same burning wish as you did at the very beginning of the process. And how do you what does it mean to like really, practice with intention, like for a long period of time, while you're in your life? That's it. I mean, I'm perpetually just baffled by that, in my life. And I appreciate the way you brought it up, Tashi, with like just trying to like use each task, chopping the vegetable to find Shiva, and then, okay, what's my task now? And I'm going to use this task to find Shiva. I thought that was super helpful too. But I'd love to hear more as you guys go through the week, as we all go through the week, about what does it really take to sustain an intention like this? How do you do it? Dharma.
So I'm reading the words, intent on determining the reality of Shiva, and it's bringing up that idea of clarity. And I know Babaji talks about being open to what's possible and not necessarily just responding from that small contracted self. And that as that those mental thought waves start to still, then clarity is possible. And so from that place, this yogi, right, this realized yogi can see what's actually possible as opposed to what the small self would want or what the small self would ask for, or the power that we talked about that the world might perceive as power. And so it's a state of surrender and openness, I think, that's possible. And I had seen like a Rudy quote, and he was talking about people coming into the store and just sort of feeding off of their energy and just be open in a state of love. And if things come up that cut off that flow, it's pointing out something in you, and it's almost like that contractedness can help point to where we need to surrender and let go. And that can be determining the reality. It's like, oh, like I can grow just by working with that. So the previous slide about the elemental or the elementary and the language and the sentences, it's just that it's all full of energy to use for our growth and to develop that mechanism so that the muscles are those internal muscles of the mechanism to use it all to grow.
And that way you can really just focus on your experience that you're having in the present, and know that your only work is to keep that path open. And when you feel that contraction, like, there's your work, that's your that's how you build the muscle. It's like really that simple, and it's really based on your individual experience in the moment, like with each new customer that walks in the door. It's, like Babaji often says, you don't have to go searching for it. Maybe a part of sustaining this type of intention through the day is really about not really trying to hold on to what you think it should feel like or look like, but rather it's really just holding on to the work of the present, working with what's in front of you, not trying to carry your ideas of the sutra per se, or the ideas of what working looks like per se, but like to really ride the wave. It's almost like you have to have an empty backpack in order to, as Bob was saying earlier, to sustain this kind of work. Like, and it's almost like emptying the backpack is really our work. And that's how we sustain it, by emptying the backpack, not by like changing the situations or fixing the problems, or using our practice, to do something externally, but like just keep emptying the backpack and getting as present as we can. Things that we've heard of before, but I'm always excited to look at it, see it from a different angle. Dialen.
I don't know if you guys talked about this last time because I wasn't there, but the escalator analogy reminds me of, and kind of what we've been talking about, and the river, and just stuff is always coming at you and you have to keep moving. Reminds me of something that, and maybe somebody else knows the Rudy quote. I just kind of know the gist of it, but it was kind of like, if you're not growing all the time, then you're like kind of moving backwards. Like, you have to be growing all the time, which used to be a really intimidating idea for me. Like, it used not so much anymore, because I think, like you said, it's just really letting go all the time is the work you have to be doing. But it used to be like, gosh, I just have to like keep growing like all the time. Like, used to
Even on, even at lunch. Who but I know we're out of time, but who, by a show of hands, who has like felt the intimidation of that statement at some point in their practice? I've definitely had that moment that Diane's talking about, where I'm like, there's no way I could possibly, and I'm just curious, like, I'd love to hear about it. Like, what shifted for you? Not right now, I don't have time right now, but like, why aren't you intimidated like that anymore? Like, what changed? Or are you? Or is it just on a good day you're not, but like, I'm curious, like, what shifted for you? And you know I think it's a fun thing to share. So boy, there's a lot of prompts. I'm gonna have to go back through and get all these prompts back, but I'll do my best to give them out during the week for our sharing between sessions. But as usual, thank you all for making this a special class. I just don't know how you do it every week. Okay. Abaya is going to lead us in a couple of ohms to finish class.
You can bring hands to heart center and just take a couple of breaths. With your next inhale, prepare to chant. We'll do 3 ohms.
Thanks again, everyone.
That was so fun.
Yeah, that was awesome. See you soon.
Diane, because you're still here, I can say this. I loved your balloon imagery, and I was like, I think I'll be in a hot air balloon because it feels safer, and then I can just like throw the sandbags out as my like getting rid of baggage. So that you inspired me. I think I'm gonna play with that a lot this week.
You guys do a really good job leading this. It's really super fun. It's fun, but really deep, and seems like it really builds like a community with these people. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Super cool.